I want to continue unpacking President Trump's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I want to bring in Dr. A.J. Nolte. Dr. Nolte is Associate Professor and Director of the Institute for Israel Studies at Regent University. Dr. Nolte, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to have you on the program.
Tony, it's great to be with you, and it's honored to follow a pro-Israel champion and my mom's congresswoman, Claudia Tenney.
Yeah, Claudia's doing a great job of working very closely with her on the Judea and the Samaria caucus. Two things I want to try to get to here in this segment. Number one is tonight the president and the prime minister meeting again to talk about, and tonight it's almost exclusively about the war in Gaza, how to bring this to a conclusion. What are the obstacles standing in the way of this?
The single biggest obstacle standing in the way of this is Hamas, and particularly Hamas's possession of hostages, because the hostages are literally the only leverage Hamas has, and the desire of the Israeli people is to bring them home. And so, you know, I've been to hostages forum and met with some of their folks, and their desire is to get every hostage out. But they also recognize that any deal you make, Hamas has a very high likelihood of breaking, and so it's a very difficult and challenging process. And so, you know, what's the leverage that you can get to let Hamas release all those hostages so the war can end, and then hopefully find some sort of peaceful, stable solution to Gaza that's going to prevent the next October 7th.
Yeah, I mean, Israel wants Hamas gone. Hamas wants to retain power. So right there, you get this conflict. I think it's going to be very difficult to resolve, and I'm not sure. I think eventually you're going to have some of the other Arab states lean in on this, who have been backing and supporting Hamas. I think Qatar's going to have to weigh in. I think you're going to have to get Saudi Arabia. I think some of these others are going to have to weigh in, or it's not going to be resolved.
Absolutely right. And Qatar is key because they have been a major financial backer of Hamas. And now that Iran seems to be largely defanged, Qatar is probably Hamas's best hope for some sort of continuance. So maybe there's some sort of deal where they're able to exile and have some resources in Qatar. But I don't think that Israel is going to agree to anything that involves a continuation of Hamas as an armed, organized presence in Gaza.
All right, this next one, I'm just going to say this up front. We're probably going to have to unpack this more later because this is an in-depth conversation, but it touches into your area of expertise. Emerging from this, and I know this has been going on. I know you were over in Israel actually recently during the outbreak of the war. I was there a couple of months ago, met with some of the leaders in Hebron, and now emerging are some tribal leaders, some sheikhs, Arabs that want to join the Abraham Accords. They want out from underneath the Palestinian Authority. The history of this land is tribal. These nation states are kind of imposed upon that post-World War I. So is that a part of the mix going forward? Finally, there's a realization that land for peace, two-state solution, even the Arabs are realizing that's not going to work. Is there a way forward here with these sheikhs coming forward saying, hey, let us have tribal opportunities here to lead our families and find a way to coexist peacefully with Israel?
It reminds me a little bit of Mansour Abbas, the Islamic background leader of the Ram party in Israel, who decided that cooperating with Zionist parties to support the government was going to be best for his constituents, many of whom are sort of Bedouin in the southern deserts. And it's a very practical, very tribal move. The significance of it is that it breaks the front in the idea that Israel will one day go away. Because if you have these sheikhs in Hebron that are trying to cut a deal with Israel, that means they're recognizing this is a permanent reality. Let's also remember during the mandate period, there were two rival power centers. One was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. Unfortunately, he won the conflict. But then there were other families and groups in then Palestinian Arab society that were maybe open to sort of different solutions. So there is a history and there are some precedents for it, but it's so new, I think, you know, we'll have to carefully watch what happens.
Now, is there a parallel from a governing structure of what we have here in our country when it comes to the Native American tribal lands, where they have limited, they have autonomy, but it's limited? And is that a possible model for Israel to look at?
I'd actually look at the model of the UN Pacific Trust, where there was a trustee relationship between us and the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Palau, etc., for a long period of time, where there's U.S. citizenship. And the reason I would use that model and not necessarily the Native American model is that Native Americans are also voters in whatever state they're in. And one of the concerns that a lot of Jewish Israelis have is to maintain the Jewish character of the state. What happens if you enfranchise all of these millions of Palestinians automatically who kind of have this history of hatred for Israel and don't support the Jewish character of the state? And so finding something that has real political representation at the local level, where you retain the democratic character of the state, but also retain the Jewish character, that's going to require some finessing if you're not going to have a Palestinian state. I think there are models, but it's a little complicated.
But it would prevent, and basically, I would think, end the discussion, the default discussion of a two-state solution, forcing Israel to give up land. They would maintain sovereignty over the entire region in terms of security and governance.
I think that's a non-negotiable. I think there's going to be security control. I think there's going to be at least some sort of Israeli sovereignty. And frankly, looking at it from the perspective of even Christians in the land, you look at the Palestinian Authority's charter. Article 3 says a Palestinian state will be an Islamic state, and Sharia is a source of legislation. That's not good news for Christians in the area, whatever some more prominent voices might be saying.
So, Dr. Nolte, we just got about a minute left. Would you say the days are limited for the Palestinian Authority?
I think unless there are immediate, substantial reforms that give Israel a lot of what it wants, I would say yes.
And I think the Arab people living under that corrupt system would say yay. Many of them, and I've met many of them, who work actually in Jewish businesses. And in fact, the sheikhs who are in Hebron, right now, because everything's locked down, the folks don't have jobs. They don't have incomes because the Israeli economy is how they make a living.
Even more than the PA, you've got to get rid of UNRWA with the multi-generational welfare and extremism of the bizarre refugee status that's there, where the refugees living in Palestinian Authority governance, but they can't buy land because they're supposed to return to 1948 Israel. That fiction has to end immediately for any kind of peace.
Yeah, the UN has actually, they've been peddling conflict. Dr. Nolte, always great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.